Jimbo, I appreciate your time, man, and for coming and speaking to me and really to parents out there about athletic performance and nutrition. As parents and athletes, they're trying to understand and navigate development. And, my goal, my hope is that having someone like you to help really educate us and help us understand how important nutrition and performance is super helpful. And so, again, I just want to really appreciate you from coming on and, just educating us on player development and performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's one of my favorite things to do is help these guys, possess those physical attributes that they need to be able to play or at least have an opportunity to play at a higher level. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Awesome. Awesome. So what we're going to do, the flow is going to be pretty basic. We're going to go through a little bit about you, your background, your education, your work history. And I think it really sets up your credentials, your experience, why you are way more qualified to speak to something like this than I am. And just truth be told, we're completely honest here. About 20 minutes before coming onto this, I had about 3 of those little snack-sized brownies from HEB
Oh yeah.
that are so
Yep.
delicious and so good. And that's exactly why I need someone to help me, because I can go through
Absolutely.
a pack of those if I'm left unsupervised.
Yeah, it's okay. Me too. I think everyone can at some point. So a little coaching and guidance never hurt anybody.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we'll kick it off with a little bit about who you are, your background. So the owner of Pernetti Sports Performance and Nutrition. And
Mhm.
just full disclosure for everyone, you are one of our first partners. I reached out to you after seeing that you work with a son of somebody that I know personally, and I was digging into your platform and what you're doing, and I reached out and thought that what you were doing would be super helpful and valuable. And so just, we had conversations, and now you are supporting us through a partnership. And so I just want everybody to know that, right up, you're not like a
Mhm.
sponsor, you're not paying for this. I just want to, yeah, I just think what you have to say is super valuable. So wanted to get that disclosure out there so people aren't like, oh, he paid for that. No, not even close.
No.
But you are a California transplant like myself, but way different. And what we're going to talk about
Oh
that
yeah.
grew up in, is it Ceres, California?
Series. Yeah.
Ceres. Okay, awesome. So Ceres, California, went to
Hmm.
Chico State, played
I did.
baseball there. You were a corner guy, third base, first
Hmm.
base. And of course, I had to look you up, right? Went to the site,
Of
looked up your
course.
stats, and I'm like, wow, Jimbo, you're a big dude, man. 6'3", 215 playing weight.
Yeah.
So corner guy for sure. Uh, got a degree in exercise physiology and then went on to
Hmm.
get a master's degree in kinesiology and biomechanics,
Yep.
which is pretty cool. And you're married, right? Married. Do you have, what's your wife's name?
Yeah, my wife's name is Marissa. She actually heads up all of our sports nutrition stuff. So she got her degrees in dietetics. So she's a lot longer, on the nutrition side than I am. But the kind of synergy that we have with the exercise science, biomechanics, and the dietetics, all kind of, essentially in the family, helps us kind of get a pretty good grasp on our athletes and be able to have oversight over the other coaches we work with and that sort of thing. So it works out
Awesome.
super well.
Awesome. So for the folks out here, my next ask is going to get Marissa on here because she, for me, is really someone that
Yeah,
that we need
absolutely.
to talk to.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
it seems like everybody, with what we do, everybody kind of meets me to get to her stuff. So I totally get it.
Yeah, the better half, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So you don't have any kids, or do you have any kids? Do you plan on having kids?
No kids yet. We get asked by the in-laws and my parents quite a bit. So we'll have a couple, hopefully, God willing. We were thinking about trying at the start of next year or something like that,
All right.
and hopefully have a couple kids because now that we're in a little better position, I
Mhm.
definitely I can't wait.
Great. So the in-laws will be happy that I'm also asking, right? So it's on record now, and they can point back to this video. So now that it's out there, right?
Hmm.
Awesome. Cool. So a
Absolutely.
little bit about you, man. Growing up, Ceres, California,
Hmm.
which when people think about California, they think primarily of San Francisco or Los Angeles. I'm a California transplant. You know, I'm in Texas now. You're a California
Yep.
transplant in Texas now, but we're different. I grew up in LA, but you grew up in Central California. Uh,
Hmm.
Talk
Hmm.
to us a little bit about what it was like growing up in Central California and how different it is from what people typically associate from California folks.
I mean, it's essentially two different states, right? You got the San Francisco, even some of the Southern California pockets that would, I mean, they even make fun of us for how we speak in Central California. But I usually tell people it's mostly agriculture, a lot more working class people in that area. You're not getting a lot of the big, like, tech money and the crazies that you get in a lot of different pockets of California. So,
Mm-hmm.
without going too far into that sort of stuff, I'm kind of right along the same lines. Like I just tell people I moved to Texas for a reason. I love it here. I just
Right.
don't like the weather. But the weather's something I'll get used to eventually, I guess, maybe.
Yes. No, you won't. You just get AC units,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's the way it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's cheaper. The AC is cheaper than in California too, so
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah. There you go. So growing up in Central California, a lot of ag.
Hmm.
Was sports always something that you dreamt about growing up, or was what did you dream about being when laying in bed at night?
Yeah, I wanted to be a big league ball player, probably just like most of the kids my age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a ton of sports. My parents, mainly my dad, kind of got me into baseball early, and it wasn't like a forced thing. Like he was a great football player, it came from football, but it wasn't, kind of like, hey, you have to play baseball. It was like, well, that's what
Mm-hmm.
I like to do. That's what I was good at. Mom would take me in the front yard and play catch with me for hours, and
Awesome.
eventually I got to the place where I think I enjoyed basketball the most, actually. But I didn't see a path forward to where I was going to be anything particularly special in basketball. And I knew
Right.
baseball was kind of my ticket because we didn't come from a lot of money or anything. I figured if I can get some money to pay for my schooling at some point, baseball is probably the way I'm going to do it. So
There you
that's
go.
that's kind of how it. Yeah, that's kind of how it works. So I've gone through the whole travel ball gauntlet. I know the schedules. I am very, very familiar.
Yes, yes. I was going to ask you if you played travel ball and all this stuff. So you've been there,
All
done
of it.
that. You lived the whole thing, right?
Lived the whole thing. We went to Cooperstown. We went to different national circuits, and now this was I don't think I'm that old, but it was a little bit before Perfect Game and all those
Mm-hmm.
bigger entities became like really big must do things. It was probably right when it was first starting, so that kind of gave me the first initial experience into it. And then when my brother started to become pretty good at baseball,
Mm-hmm.
it was like I already know all the different things that you kind of need to do, and here's what it looked like for me. But yeah, that's a little bit of how I grew up Central Valley wise in sports.
Awesome. And at what point? So you thought early on that, hey, we don't have a lot of money. I love basketball, but maybe that wasn't your where your skill set was. And so at what point do you think you really thought to yourself, I'm going to dedicate myself to baseball because I actually have a chance to play in college? Was that in high school, middle school? When did you start thinking about that?
Kind of high school.
Mm-hmm.
I never had aspirations of like, I'm going to go play Division I basketball somewhere, but I knew I could do it for baseball. I try to speak pretty humbly about myself, but I was good at baseball. If
Mm-hmm.
especially in high school, I was pretty good. I knew that was my ticket, but what I kind of found out later on was that so I graduated high school. I think I had a 4.167 cumulative GPA. And not, I don't like to, say any academic stuff because I think most of the people that cite their education like that are usually jerks. But with that being said, my counselors, especially in that pocket of California, didn't really tell me, hey, with your grades, you could get money at all these different schools and then walk onto the baseball team. I was
Right.
oblivious to that. So I didn't even know that was an option. What I ended up doing was going to junior college out of high school
Mm-hmm.
because realistically, I had offers from East Coast D1s. I had some various Division II offers and some NAIA stuff. But in my mind, I'm like, well, if I can go to junior college and really, show well out there, hopefully I can go to a school that I would like to go to, something on
Mhm.
the West Coast and be a little closer to my family. And that's the path I decided to pursue.
Outstanding. Outstanding. I recently did a video where I cited some stats from NCAA showing that only 8.1% of high school baseball players will make it to the collegiate level, which
Yeah.
is that's a pretty big cut, right?
Hmm.
At that
Hmm.
point. So even like to go the JUCO route and then to play, at a major college, you're already in a class of their own, right? So
Hmm.
kudos for that. And nowadays it's getting even harder, which is why it's important.
Yeah.
Our conversation is super important. In the transition from high school to maybe JUCO and then even JUCO to Chico State, what was your experience? Was did you notice that, wow, this is a lot faster, this is a lot different than the high school level?
Yeah, it's kind of like you jump in from a high school team where you're probably the best kid on the team or close to it. And then you get to even at the junior college level, you get there and you're playing with men. Some of those guys have been there for 3 years because there's 17 red shirts or whatever they're doing. They've
Mm-hmm.
been lifting weights all 3 of those years. They found the weight room. They found out, oh, if you get bigger and stronger, you can hit the ball farther and throw it harder. That's the biggest jump right there. So
Mm-hmm.
we got into the fall schedule at my junior college. It was like, hey, we're training 5 days a week, and then if you want to have a shot to make it somewhere else, you're probably training after practice too. There's
Right.
no go sit home on the couch. And of course, there's guys that did that, but those guys obviously didn't end up playing after that. So,
Right.
but yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of I don't know. That was my experience. Is wasn't even that the game was that much faster. It was more like everybody is a lot more, mature within the game and also advanced physically, and that's I think the biggest step.
Right. Right. And so, and this is a two-part question. So you ended up studying exercise physiology and then kinesiology. And I find for whatever reason, a lot of athletes, they are drawn to that line of education, that line of work, like moths
Yeah,
to a flame. You just can't resist it.
yeah.
So what was your, why did you decide to study what you studied in school?
Well, a couple answers to this, but undergraduate wise, when I was doing exercise physiology, I actually wanted to do physical therapy. So I
Mm-hmm.
knew physical therapists that did kind of help me along the way. And I think that's a lot with a lot of the things most athletes experience is like, hey, I've had a couple people along the line that really helped me. I want to be able to do that same thing for other athletes. But then I ended up interning at a physical therapy spot, actually in Modesto, kind of near Ceres. And it was not athlete population, it was general population. We get a lot of older clients,
Mm-hmm.
broken legs, hips, you name it. And then I would see the physical therapist basically meet with the client one on one to start and then pass them off to the aide. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't want to do that really. I wanted a more hands on feel. And even if it's not for athletes, but I want to be able to feel like I'm actually taking care of someone. I knew I wasn't going to get that there. So that's kind of how I ended up in the exercise physiology world. And then once I did, finished up baseball and everything, once I decided to pursue my master's, it was kind of two-part because my back, I'm notorious for having a bad back and throwing my back out, especially my
Mm.
junior, senior year at college, which is a hindrance on every stat, throwing, hitting.
Right.
I mean, you name it. It was not fun. And my roommates used to let me hear it every day when I'd show up back at the apartment with a crooked back. But that was in part why I wanted to study the biomechanics stuff is because
Mm-hmm.
I had gone to doctors, physical therapists, chiropractors, and kind of try to take a little bit of piece from each of them, but no one had really the solution I was looking for. So I decided part of that was going to be I want to learn how the body moves a little bit better. I know the physiology behind it, but now I need more of the anatomy piece and how everything functions as a whole. And
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of the driving force of like, well, I want to be able to fix my back, but I want to be able to help people kind of avoid the situation that I'm in because realistically, it is something that if you're proactive about, you can avoid.
Right.
And kind of finally, I wanted to be able to teach at the junior college level. I knew that my coaches and professors at the junior college level, and it was California, granted, but they made pretty good money. And I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
at their life. I'm like, these guys teach a couple classes, get to coach baseball afterward,
Right.
and then go on recruiting tours during the summer. So that's kind of how that happened. Obviously, none of that happened. So they say man plans and God laughs, and I think that's a little bit of the experience I
Yes,
got.
yes, yes. That is so true. That is so true. I can't tell you how many times in my life where my plans were terrible. Only, God is sitting there with a bucket of popcorn just watching me like, man, what are you
Yeah,
thinking?
you
Right?
have no idea.
Yes, yes. So now you've graduated, you're beginning to get into the world a little bit, life after college. What was that transition like? What was your first gig? Yeah, I guess after doing the internship, what were
Yeah.
you up to?
So I did a little bit of stuff with my dad just to help him out because he does like process services and legal documents and things like that. So I would serve papers with him once in a while. But my first actual job was Olive Garden. I was bussing tables at Olive Garden, and then I ended up, waiting tables. And I laugh to this day because I'm like, I love waiting tables. You get to communicate with all kinds of different people. I like it. It's fast paced. It was a ton of fun. And that's kind of
Hmm.
how I made my cash during college, which while
Hmm.
I'm studying master's degrees are, you're not in any full scholarship for a master's degree if you're not playing a sport. So those are a little bit more expensive. And that's kind of how I made my cash is basically working at Olive Garden, which was a ton of fun. And then, of course, I advanced a little bit and I ended up teaching classes at the college and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But that's how it started.
Yep. Awesome. And then you ended up at a company called Exos. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. So
Could you tell,
this,
yeah, what exactly is Exos? What do they do? And then what did you do there?
yeah. So Exos, I kind of explain this differently to people. Not a whole lot of people know really about Exos. I didn't either. I learned about it. My younger brother had been going to some showcases through Exos that they would do. And then I just did a little bit of studying and eventually my dad and my brother would go to these things every so often, kind of introduced me to the people there because they had developed good relationships. And eventually, yeah, they offered me a job and I moved out to Texas. But Exos, for anybody that doesn't know, especially at their really core athletic performance institutes, there used to be five of them. Now I believe there's only three. But
Hmm.
at those facilities, they have a dietitian in house. They have your sports performance coaches in house. They have physical therapy in house, and then pretty much anything the athletes need, you name it. There's usually a masseuse that comes in and they cater the food and all those sorts of things. The highest tech, the most advanced, cool stuff that you can be around is usually housed in those Exos facilities. Their main thing is NFL Combine Prep, which the one in Frisco that I was blessed to work out for a little while ran the largest one in the country, year in and year out.
Wow.
So I got to work along some really, really cool athletes for a while and basically study and observe the highest level coaches that I mean, I would believe are in the country or probably in the world with those two. But they did NFL Combine Prep. They would do NFL offseason stuff, MLB offseason, and then you get a handful of like Olympians, NBA guys, kind of you name
Hmm.
it. If you were a high level athlete and didn't have a facility you could, basically drive to down the road, like if it, we didn't get a lot of Cowboys guys, obviously, because they have a facility here. But those
Right.
other guys, especially during the off season, that's kind of where those guys go. And it's a little bit more like, you're not having Tyreek Hill go train amongst a bunch of other people. He's in with a bunch of other guys that are just like him. So that's
Yeah.
what those places are, and they are super super cool. If you ever go get to check one out.
Yeah. So it sounds to me that is much more what you envisioned doing out of school versus just, helping old guys with their Achilles
Right.
tendons because they think they're still 20 years old and dream of the NBA. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a lot more fun, and it was, I tell a bunch of stories from it. But one of the first people I met at this facility was Tyron Smith, which is a tackle for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about? I've always baseball. You're a decent sized guy, right? I'm 6'3", probably
Yeah.
210 right now or so. I mean, it was like I've never seen a human that big tower over me, take my hand with a hand twice my size, and then I'm watching him warm up with 315 on an incline bench. And I was like, okay,
Oh my
this
gosh.
is completely different from anything I've been around.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So in that experience, you're right off the bat, the physique, you're noticing, wow, there is something very different about the top 1% versus us
Yeah.
99 percenters, right? What were some of the things, besides, let's say, when you were around the football or, other athletes, what were they like in terms of just physique and like height, weight, to play at the top levels?
Yeah, so football in particular, because that's a lot of what at least when I first got there, that's what I was around.
Hmm.
Those guys, yeah, are obviously big and strong, but I don't think people really grasp the power that those guys have. So, for example, I'm trying to think. There were several athletes that would train at the facility that you'd watch the football guys doing their bags where they got to slap the bag and get around them. Um, I would be watching those drills, and I mean, there's a certain fear in you. Like, if you ever piss off one of those guys, like he might be able to kill you in one swing of his arm. But just the obviously, yeah, the size and strength, but the power they can produce is just unbelievable. And then obviously, once the baseball guys get in there too, it's along those same lines. They
Hmm.
might not have that big stature that those football guys have, but the power that they produce is unbelievable. And I don't think a lot of people really appreciate how well these guys move. So
Oh,
you might have one of those big D tackles from any team, and they move like they're maybe not like a middle infield shortstop guy, but they move very well for the size that they are, and it is impressive to watch.
wow. That's just amazing. And
Yeah.
on TV, they look that little, but
Oh yeah.
you take that and multiply it times 1,000, and that's really what you're talking about, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So one of my favorite guys, his name is Gerald McCoy, and obviously he was coming off of at the end of his career, kind of when I was at Exos. But I mean, he's a big superhero fan. He loves the show The Office, and
Oh,
so I would get to watch him do stuff out on the turf a lot of the time. And I used to laugh because I go back to those bags that they would work with. I used to mess with some of our interns and say, "Hey, Gerald's missing a bag out there. I need one of you guys to go stand in." And like the shock and the fear in their faces was hilarious. And it's just
right.
that sort of thing. And keep in mind, most of those guys, I say most of them are pretty nice dudes too. They're a lot of
Mhm.
fun. They are I think appreciative of kind of where they're at in their careers, and it was really cool for me to be able to experience working with those guys. And even if I'm not working with them, even just watching them with a different coach, just to kind of be around them, see how they do their stuff, and really, learn what it takes to be in their position was a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly gives you that perspective that I would say most of us really don't get to see. We're not, we don't have that intimate, uh, viewpoint, for professional athletes of different things because I was reading on the site, there's people that are Olympians, you have football players, MLB, all these top 1% of like any sport out there.
Yeah.
And we were chatting a couple of days ago. We took a trip to Arizona and we're just playing with a tennis racket because at night, because that's the only time you can do
Hmm.
anything. And within 3 minutes, you're toast, you're done. And then you go and watch the match, and they're out there potentially for hours,
Yeah.
hours,
Yep.
and
Yep. I
you you're very a lot more appreciation for really what it takes to be an athlete.
Yeah, and it really is. It's like that across, almost every sport. It's like if you're not, and even just from an injury perspective, if you're not treating your body right, if you're not taking care of yourself in the weight room with your diet, all these sorts of things, A, you're not going to be able to last very long in whatever sport you're playing, and B, you're
Hmm.
probably going to get hurt at some point. So,
Right.
weak things break, and that's part of what applies to the weight room. If you're not treating it like you should, there's a potential that it doesn't last very long.
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of transition into the weight room. This is a big topic, right? We talk about NFL guys, they're warming up 315 incline bench, which is crazy
Insane.
to
Yeah.
think about. So they're lifting heavy, they're bulking up or whatever. With let's say baseball, right? Because I hear this all the time, and to be truthful, and it is mostly dads that are out there saying that you can't lift heavy because you don't want to be too big for baseball.
Mhm.
And I'm hearing from coaches. I'm hearing from guys like you at the college level, as you just explained, the big difference when you get to even at the JUCO level, you're competing against grown men, right?
Yes.
And they're big, they're strong, and they're fast. And so we have this mentality that for baseball, weights are a bad thing almost. And I would just love to get this is probably going to be a monologue, right? So
Yeah, I could go for this for hours.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Let's talk about the weight room as it relates to baseball. And I would just love open question. Just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is kind of if you don't befriend the weight room from an early age in any, baseball or softball, really, you are not going to last very long. I mean, there are probably a handful of guys that I can name. I actually talked with a buddy the other day about one of them um, that are just high level athletes and they just are blessed with those gifts. For everybody else, and I'm talking, that's probably five guys in Major League Baseball, max.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else has to be in the weight room, in the recovery room, and everything else all the time, and that's part of your job. Um, and the guy that we were talking about, and I'm not going to mention names on here because I'll get in trouble, but
Yep.
that guy is hurt every other year. He also throws 100. He's gifted. He moves well. He's already strong, and he throws 100. But he is not in the weight room. He doesn't like to lift, and he's on one of your favorite teams. He gets hurt all the time. So it's stuff like that. And then I have even in my off-season stuff, when I get to lift with some of the big league guys, I can't even tell you how many guys I know that are upper 90s to 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. And this is the example I used to because you hear, oh, don't bench press them, don't bench press them, not going to go
Mm-hmm.
hard. And, there are certain truths to that for sure. However, for what it's worth, a couple of the guys that throw the hardest in the game bench press the most. And I'll just leave it at that. That's not to say you have to bench press 1,000,000 pounds to throw hard,
Mm-hmm.
but it is to say that you do have to be strong to be able to excel in whatever position you're at. Um, the weight room needs to be done properly as well. So you can't just go, do some bodybuilder, power lifter workouts and expect for it to translate to the field. You have to
Mm-hmm.
go in there with a strategic plan, right? We have to be able to move well. We have to be able to be strong and powerful, but we also have to be able to rotate and sequence properly. That's the big miss at a lot of different gyms that we'll get is because maybe they do, I mean, rarely does somewhere do all of those poorly, but they usually miss out on one or two of them. And that's where we start to see injuries or just misses within the game. But for what it's worth, every big leaguer at some point is in the gym routinely, and they're on
Right.
a specific plan for them.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny, and I'll rope in a video somehow to this. The rotation, and you kind of saw my post. My son, he's
Yeah, it
a
was good.
football and baseball, right? And he, made a tackle on a running back. It was like a quarterback
Mm-hmm.
keep, and he ended up going after the running back and kind of just slung the kid, right?
Yeah,
As a baseball guy, first of all, as a dad, I was just like, whoa.
let's go.
But then a baseball guy, I'm looking at the video and thinking, wow, that's a great baseball stance. That's a baseball
Yeah,
move.
yeah,
And
yeah,
kind of the joke is, hey, swinging a bat, you creating that rotation is no different than swinging a kid, right?
yeah. Which
Right.
is it is very true. That rotational power will translate across sports, and you may not use it how you would see it, but it for
Mm-hmm.
sure will help.
Right. Yeah. And so, because I was looking at guys, even like multi sport guys, I see a lot of kids that at some point they want to focus, which I understand, but what I'm seeing is that they're not focusing in order to they're almost focusing way too early. They want to specialize
Yeah.
in middle school, right? And they're missing out on opportunity to be explosive, to be athletic. Baseball is kind of like uh, if you're not careful, you develop really good muscles to turn left because you're just turning
Right.
left around the bases.
Yeah.
But when you're in the outfield, when you're in the infield, you have to be able to move quickly and be explosive any direction. So the movement, the strength. Part of that is to drive the baseball. I'm hearing coaches like, hey, if you're not driving the baseball, I'm not even taking a look.
Oh yeah.
Weight, mass, is a
Yeah.
part of that as well. And then injury. this is the part about baseball people don't understand. It is a long season,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it is prone to fatigue and injury, especially if you're young. I feel like kids are playing too much of one thing. Like
Yeah.
baseball, literally, they play more baseball games in a year than like 2 major league seasons, right?
Yeah.
And you know that come traveling.
Yeah.
So having just working different muscles in different ways, being a multi-sport athlete, I think is super beneficial and definitely translates into the game.
Yeah, certainly. And, I think just the way the game is right now, at some point you definitely will have to specialize, right? Because there's missed opportunity of things, there's opportunity cost. If I'm not working on this for my baseball game, then I am doing something else and may not be able to help me as much. But you kind of hit it on the head. It's like you're going to specialize at some point.
Right.
It just doesn't need to be that early, right? Like we'll have lots of different, I mean, our whole thing is we want to build good athletes that are also good at baseball. And if we totally take out every other sport, it not only hinders you athletically, but it also puts you at risk of overuse injuries, like you kind of explained, going left the whole time. Even
Mhm.
just if I'm rotating in a swing or a throw, in that spine, if I'm rotating one way all day, every day, eventually those discs are going to wear out, and
Mhm.
you're not going to feel very good eventually. And it may not hit you when you're 12, it may not even hit you when you're 25, but at some point you're going to be like, wow, something was messed up, and that's typically what it's from.
Yep.
So yes, I think that the game has become so metrics focused right now that you do have to specialize. You do have to be able to hit certain numbers. Otherwise, like you said, people aren't even going to take a look at you, and that's just the nature of the game right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But early on, the more that we can kind of develop that coordination, the hand-eye coordination, and teach our body good movement patterns, the better off you're going to be really with any sport.
Yeah. And then just to be my frame of reference, I've coached from little to high school. And what I'm seeing specifically at the high school level, kids, not that they're undersized, but you're hitting puberty. Guys are turning, we call them, they look like baby giraffes out there, right? They're
Yeah.
tall, they're long and lanky, but they're weigh 135 pounds. And they're really, really challenged in putting on weight. But before they get to that, um, when you're, let's say, middle school age, you definitely, we're not saying they need to start bench pressing or doing cleans and things like that. But the idea of some type of resistance training, do you think that that's still a good idea even at that age?
Not only a good idea, I think it's necessary if you want
Mm-hmm.
any shot. Because if I just took you and plopped you in at 14 into a high school weight room, and you find your high school has a good training program, that's going to be a challenge for you if you have no base layer of strength. And I get parents
Yeah.
that will be like, "Oh, we don't want them to be doing all the football workouts and this and that." And I'm like, "Yeah, but at some point, that kid really needs that real base layer of strength to be
Yeah.
able to do other lifts and do different things." So that is certainly and obviously it's got to be done with the intention that we're going to progress them, right? So we'll start with
Mm-hmm.
maybe some bands, then we'll go to some dumbbells and then kettlebells, and then we'll find a squat rack or whatever, something
Right.
along those lines. But if that does, I mean, most of those, especially the band resistance and medicine balls, can start even earlier than middle school. And
Mm-hmm.
we already know from it's pretty old data now that would say, hey, if you start lifting weights too early, you're going to stunt your growth.
Oh yeah.
Well, if you're doing it improperly and you damage your growth plates, yes. But otherwise, no. So all you're going to do is be able to, make yourself stronger, create a little bit of stability in your body, and eventually that's going to make you move a heck of a lot better and progress through the weight room portion when you get there a lot faster.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Jimbo, we're running out of time here. I'm going to cut the
Okay.
video, whatever. So what I'm
Right.
going to do, we're going to transition into nutrition and then the business and stuff like that here.